Hi, everyone, and welcome to Drama 1342 Theater Costume. I'm Angela Baccaris, and I am the professor for the lecture portion of the class, and Professor James McDaniel will be teaching the lab portion of the class. So I wanted to start today with appreciating costumes. So, what is appreciation? Appreciation is more than liking a thing. It implies that you understand that thing. And so the goal for this class is that you understand a costume. So when you request, we need a different doublet, you understand how we get to that pretty costume on stage, that it doesn't just happen magically, but there's time and thought and labor and effort put into creating what you see on stage. If you know enough about something, whether it's painting, theater, or costumes, then you can explain better why you like it, why you need it to be different, why you want it to be different, those kinds of things. It's the difference between writing a review, I like it, I didn't like it, and writing a critique. I liked it because, and then you can fill in the blank with how it relates to the theories, how it relates to time, how, as far as costume goes, how it relates to the script analysis, how it relates to the costume analysis, how it relates to the character analysis, how it relates to the style of theatrical presentation. All of that comes in. And so that is what we want you to come out of this class with. Okay, so what is a costume? Well, according to Webster's, it's dress in general, so clothing in general, including ornament and style of hair, especially the distinctive style of dress for a people, a class of people, a locality, or a time period. Now, notice style of hair is included in there. In most costume design, hair and makeup is part of the job of the costume designer. It is rare that there is a separate hair and makeup designer, except possibly in television and film, in opera, and then when there is something special in a play. So like Hairspray, the hair becomes very special and needs to have a separate hair designer because that's a huge job. Wicked is another one where you have to have a makeup designer because mostly actors are responsible for their own makeup. They have to know how to do it unless it is a special effect. At which point, when you get into special effects, you start to have makeup designers and makeup artists present. Okay, so let's talk about the 5 types of clothing. There are 5 types of clothing, and it's really important that you know these. Hint, 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 and that you understand how they're different. This comes into play when you're designing a show. So if you want to grow up and be a director, then you need to be able to talk to a designer. And so you need to be able to talk in these 5 terms to the people who are doing your costumes. So let's talk about that. Okay, natural. Natural clothing is clothing that is made from plants or animals, which most clothing is anyway, but that it is not manipulated. So it's just using the grass as it exists, not weaving it together. It's using the animal skin just as it exists, maybe wrapped around the body, maybe tied to the body, maybe belted, sometimes with a cut in it so you can slide it over the head. But generally speaking, the skins and the plants are not manipulated to create a different fabric. Okay, that's number 1, natural. Number 2 is draped. In draped clothing, you have manipulated the fiber or the animal skin to create a piece of fabric, okay? But the fabric is simply wrapped around the body. it doesn't have any sewing. And sometimes when you get into the Greek and Roman, there might be a little bit of sewing, but it's mostly held together with pins or ties, whether it's a belt or you tie it together. Think of like a sarong. A sarong is just wrapped around the body and then tied to itself. Okay. Draped clothing allows for a lot of freedom of movement of the body and tends to happen in time periods or in cultures where the body is not seen as bad or evil, that it's okay to show your body. The next type is the semi-fitted. The semi-fitted, the easiest way to remember this is that it is a T-shaped tunic, okay? It is the most common clothing right now. In this time period in history, you can go to almost any country, any civilization on the planet Earth, and you will find people wearing T-shaped tunics. As a matter of fact, I bet over half of you are wearing a t-shirt right now. I'm wearing a t-shirt right now. Okay. It is the third most simple garment that you can wear in the world, in human existence. Okay. So it usually slips on over the head, or it might be open down the front like a kimono, but they're boxy. They have limited number of seams in them. They're easy and they flow. All right, next we get a little stricter and we have the fitted or tailored garment. So in the fitted garment, we have more seams, and the more seams you have, the more smoothly it fits the body. But when you have something that fits the body very tightly, that is not made out of stretch fabric, it can limit your movement. It can make it difficult to raise your arm and those kinds of things. Now, I say not made out of knit clothing because when you think of a dancer and you think of them in a leotard and tights, that is very close to their body, but they have complete freedom of movement. That is because the fabric stretches. Most woven fabrics don't stretch unless you cut them in a way that they do, which we'll talk about later in the semester. So when you think about tailored, it's about control. Tailored garments are very controlled. And then finally, we have our distorted shapes. Distortion is when you change the shape of the body. You hide the natural shape of the body. So this could be padding, boning, and it definitely changes how we move. Okay, an example there of a wig being held up by a servant. Okay, obviously you can't move quickly. The peignets, the hip padding on the sides from the 17th and 18th century, when those got that big, that caused the invention of French doors. It's one of the ways that fashion caused a change in architecture because women had to turn sideways to go through the door. And because these first became popular in France, that's why they're called French doors, because they had to create a door that a woman could walk through without having to turn sideways. And of course, the one that most of us who study theater that know is the Elizabethan, because we see that mostly when we think of our Shakespearean plays. Though a lot of people don't do them in Elizabethan dress anymore, but the ruff around the neck and the big padded sleeves, the big shaped skirts with farthingales and the men in pumpkin breeches, all of this padding distorts the body. So how do these develop in different places and different cultures? Well, it has a lot to do with climate. Okay. Warm climates had agricultural technology, so that led to using plants for food, but you have this byproduct of fiber that can end up being woven into a cloth that can be wrapped around your body. So thinking togas, that type of thing. In a cold climate, you couldn't necessarily grow crops, so you had to You had to hunt for your food. Of course, hunting leads to sharp tools, and then the byproducts of those animals are the skins. And you can use the skins to wrap around your body, or you can use the sinew like a thread and sew those two pieces together with a needle, which is a sharp tool, and you end up with a tailored garment, something that is put together. So a lot of times when we think of warm climates, and then imagine what shape clothing do you see in warm climates? You see T-shaped tunics and you see draped clothing. When you think of cold climates, what clothing do you see? You see semi-fitted and fitted. And then of course, when you think of capes and blankets and those kinds of things, there's a draped overgarment that you'll see. Okay, so why did we decide to decorate our bodies? There are very important reasons when you're thinking about, okay, I'm doing this play and this character got up in the morning and they got dressed. Why did they dress in these clothes? They dressed in this clothing because they're climbing K2, if you know the play K2, and it's very, very cold. So they got dressed for protection from the environment. They got up this morning and we're doing a restoration comedy and it's all about love and finding the perfect mate. Well, they got dressed for sexual attraction. Or they're got up that morning and they're the maid in an 18th century play. And they know what the social expectations of their place is. Okay. So what does that mean? How do we see protection? So protection is not just from the environment, but it can also be from the supernatural. So where a bridal veil was originally worn, and in many cultures is still worn, to keep evil spirits away from the bride as she moves from her home to the church. Okay. In some cultures, there's body painting and tattooing that is about keeping evil spirits away and those kinds of things. In the Middle East, you'll see very loose flowing T-shaped tunics. That is a way to protect yourself from the sun, but also protect yourself from blowing sand. And it keeps the body cool, as opposed to the tighter garments you see in Inuit communities where they're made out of furs and they're tight to the body so that the body stays warm. Grass skirts were originally a function like a horse's tail. It keeps flies away. So having that rustling, but also the sound of it, the sound of that rustling is supposed to keep evil spirits away. So then as time progresses, we get the taffeta petticoat, and that taffeta petticoat is supposed to keep the evil spirits away from you, but also taffeta was said to be flea resistant. So it kept bugs away from you also. So it stays the same as it evolves through time. Okay. Display and attraction. We are trying to draw people to us. So what is appropriate in that time period? You know, we look at this picture, the one in the bottom center is from the television show Miami Vice. And if we saw a guy walking down the street in that pale blue suit right now, we'd be like, oh my goodness, what is that? But in the 1980s, that was seen as the highly attractive. You wanted everybody to look like that. The Chinese practice of foot binding, which is outlawed now, but it was said that a princess had very small feet. And so then everybody wanted very small feet. And so they distorted and damaged women's feet for hundreds of years because it was seen as being more attractive. At one time period, the sexiest part of your body that you could expose was your ears. And so clothing evolved so that your ears were covered. And that's that picture on the lower left. The garment that is seen as the most erotic right now is the corset of all things, and the corset was originally developed for distorting the body, right? So it evolved from one meaning to another meaning. So you've got to think about what was considered attractive in the time period that you're working in and in the culture that you're working in when you're working with costumes. Okay, and finally, social. There are two people on the right side of the screen. Do you know what their job is? How do you know what their job is? You know what their job is because of how they are dressed. Now, what's different between the person on the top and the person on the bottom? The headdress. Now, when was the last time that you saw a nurse wearing a hat like that? But universally in the Western culture, we recognize that as a 20th century nurse, because that is what nurses looked like throughout the 20th century. They wore a white either dress or top and pants, and then they had this white hat with the stripes on the top of it. Doctors don't wear that. But if you took that hat off of her, she could be a doctor. We would see that as a doctor. The women in the center photo are from the Broadway production of Waitress. We don't see a whole lot of waitresses dressed like that, but socially we recognize that that is a waitress. We also know what's appropriate in our culture. So there might be something that's appropriate to wear to school. I got dressed this morning because it's not appropriate for me to go to work without clothes on. There are cultures where it's appropriate for you to show your arms or your legs or your hair. And there are cultures where it is not appropriate to show your arms, your legs, or your hair. So you've got to think about what the context of the clothing is and how it fits into the world of the play that you're working on. Okay, so there's a whole lot that you're thinking about as you're developing costumes. Okay, so costume is a general term that is both a noun and a verb. And basically what they mean is customary dress, the dress that is customary to the time and place. So general terms for costume are apparel, clothing, dress, garb, garments, regalia. But you'll notice that they can be a noun and they can be a verb. I can wear a costume and I can costume an actor. Same word, two different meanings. As verbs, they signify getting ready for a public appearance. For each character, we provide a costume, clothing suitable to the personality, the station in life, and the occasion that they are appearing in. The scene, what is happening in this scene? There's a king and a servant. There is a wedding happening. There is a farmer giving a monologue. There's a grave digger giving the monologue. What is appropriate to that moment? Moreover, costumes become moving parts of the stage picture, especially as they're seen under lighting. So you also have to consider what is the stage space that they're being seen in, and what are the lighting effects that they're being seen under. So it just starts to pile on all of these things that you need to think about. So you have to pick one thing to start with. I have a character in this play, and this is what's happening. I have to do my play analysis, and I have to do my character analysis. And then I have to look at the style in which the director is going to do the play. Are they going to set it in ancient Rome? Are they going to set it in 1960s New England? Are they going to set it in the 1980s in the Amazon rainforest? These are all things that have happened to me, by the way, not all with exactly the same play, but pretty close. So you have to start there and then grow from there as you develop your costume. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you again later.